question. What do these jobs have in common? Accountant, carpenter, beautician, electrician, photographer, graphic artist, interior designer, choreographer, writer, chef, seamstress. They all work in the Oklahoma film industry. And there's a place for you to join the action. Learn more about starting your film career in Oklahoma by visiting okfilmmusic.org/getting started.
Welcome to deadCenter's Virtual Film Festival as we are here celebrating their 20th year. We are so proud to be here at the Tower Theater and just welcome you to this incredible festival. I'm Tava Maloy-Sofsky, the director of the Oklahoma Film and Music Office, also known as OF+MO. So in your festival schedule, you will see our branded events as OF+MO and also at other events throughout the year. So we are just incredibly proud to not only be a sponsor of deadCenter, but we consider ourselves true partners and sort of like family, actually. And so we have just really enjoyed 20 years of working so closely with deadCenter, which is just an elite team, the entire Oklahoma film community, and all of our visitors, and just could not be more proud to kick off the OF+MO branded film school here at deadCenter. So thank you again for joining us. And our session today features Oklahoma film professional screenwriter Matt Payne, who you are going to get to hear from as he gives you an introductory workshop this morning. So without further ado, I am actually going to do one little housekeeping note. So if you are tuning in on Facebook Live, we invite you to put some questions into the chat box, because I'm going to turn this over to Matt, and then I will rejoin Matt at the end of his instruction. And so we want to get to your questions. We'll have a live Q&A. So without further ado, I am proud to turn it over to Matt Payne.
Hey everybody, thank you guys for tuning in to this first session for deadCenter. This is a really exciting time. It's a unique experience communicating with you guys this way, but it looks like we've already got some people on, which is very exciting. I want this to feel as interactive as possible. So while I'm going to work through a presentation that I put together, I do encourage you to weigh in with questions as we sort of move through it, and I'm going to save plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So just a little background on me. I have worked in Hollywood as a television writer, writing for very large shows, and I have been a documentary filmmaker here in Oklahoma as well, so have seen projects through to completion where I oversee the direction, the story, the editing. So I've got a wide range of experience, from the very guerrilla style filmmaking to large scale Hollywood productions. And so what I've done today is I've put together basically a Screenwriting Essentials, but this, as much as this is about screenwriting, it's about stories, and it's about making sure that we're picking stories that we have mastery over, that we're setting ourselves up to succeed, and that we're executing our scripts in ways that meet professional standards. So our scripts look good, they feel real, they feel impactful, and ultimately they are marketable, right? Because we all want to see our movie get made. So what I'm going to do is I want to start with just the very basics, and this is what I've taught screenwriting at OCU. I've taught different deadCenter film festivals, so this may feel like something you've heard before, but I'm gonna spell it out for you again. The most important thing that you want to think about as you are writing is that you want to pick a story that you know, pick a story that you're familiar with. Aaron Sorkin has a brilliant masterclass that he sort of teaches this, and this similar concept, and to me, I think taking an idea, taking an experience from your life is the best way to write a first screenplay, to write a second screenplay, but really to write a screenplay that you're passionate about. So I want to walk you through why I think this is the most important step of it. The first is that you know all three acts of the story. Like every beginning Every really good story we know has a beginning and has a middle and an end, an inciting incident. And an inciting incident is something that takes one world and an incident happens that spins it off. And over the course of 3 acts, we want to see how this incident is resolved. Our lives are full of stories. And if you're around really good storytellers, they can tell you stories. They can make a trip to the grocery store sound interesting. One of the things that I loved about teaching at OCU is watching my students figure out that they don't need to be these sweeping epics. They would dial into basic stories that they were familiar with, and then you can dress them out into whatever sort of universe you wish to create. But it starts with the fundamental idea. And the first thing is that you know all 3 acts. You know how the story ends because you lived it. You care about the story because it's a part of who you are. The next piece of it is that you know the characters. One of the things that I struggle with in reading screenplays is often I read really, really, really clear protagonists, but what winds up happening is all the peripheral characters are sort of facades. They're sort of archetypal characters that are put in place to drive the protagonist towards whatever end that the screenplay has. When you write about characters, when you write about a story that you're familiar with, you're going to use characters that you know. You understand them. The best screenplays, the tertiary characters are as important as your main character, as your main protagonist and your main antagonist. And when you are filling up a story that you're familiar with around people that you know, by virtue of that, no matter what, your story is going to seem more believable. It's going to seem more real. Your characters will all be more empathetic and relatable. That relatability is really what makes strong films. And to extrapolate on that, when you are basing your stories on and your characters on people that you know, people that you're familiar with, or people that you admire, people that you look up to, but people that you are very, very familiar with, you know their voices. So one of the things that happens when I read screenplays, it happens all the time, is that I get into the scripts and every character sounds the same. The patterns, the word choices, the nuance sort of goes away. But for instance, I know Teva very well, and I know Yusuf very well, and they each have really interesting voices. Lance McDaniel has a very unique voice. My mother has a very unique way in which she speaks. And by applying these vocal patterns, what it allows you to do is to tap into the overall essence of who that person is. And then your screenplay feels more like you're watching something that's a slice of life. It becomes believable, and your reader is going to be more invested in that role. What it also does is, the goal of a screenplay is ultimately to get it to turn into a film. And what you want is, you want actors to be excited to play these roles. So yes, they want emotional arcs, but they want dialogue that's vibrant and feels real. And you want to be able to differentiate that one character from the other. One of the things that I like to think, to really demonstrate a good trick in trying to figure out like how strong are your characters' voices is, after you read the first 10 pages of a script, could you white out every character's name and still track who's speaking at any given time, because you've created a unique enough voice and point of view for that character to actually make it go forward. And the best way to do this is to base your characters, build your characters around people that you know and people that you admire. Another reason why your story matters more than some story that you made up is because you care about your stories. You know, when you're sitting around, I always think of it as a dinner party. If you're sitting at a group of people, at a table of strangers, and you've got to tell one story that's going to make an impression on people, you pick one that you care about. You pick one that shows development, that it shows how you've changed, how you've evolved as a person. And so the advantage of going into the archive, our own personal archives of narratives, is that our archives are full of stories that we care about, which leads me to my next point, is that your life is full of stories. As a documentary filmmaker, I've been blessed to be brought into the lives of all kinds of people, from storm chasers when I did a project for Griffin Communications to stories all around Oklahoma and Oklahoma City. You get to know these people, and their stories are important. So your life is full of these stories as well, and they're endless. You have a treasure trove of stories that are meaningful, that have helped you get to be the person that you are. So value the stories that exist in your own life, and you're going to do. Your stories are just going to be fundamentally better. And there's also a lot of them. I'm going to talk about volume and the importance of writing a lot later in the presentation. But moving on, the next section that I want to get into is, those are the ways that I suggest to mine your life for stories. The next piece that I'm going to relay, and it's a little tricky because I don't want this to be a class specifically on formatting, but there are all kinds of tools. Formatting is really, really important. So one of the questions, as I was reading through some of the suggested topics from the film office, was, can you write a screenplay in Word, Microsoft Word? Can you use, or is it better to use screenwriting software? What I will say is, as the way that you need to think about how you write your scripts, do you need software? The best software being Final Draft, another software being Celtics is a cheaper one. But it's important because what it does is it allows your screenplay to look correct. It's formatted as close to correct as possible, because a script is a blueprint. So unlike a book, a screenplay is more like an architectural blueprint. So when you look at a building and a building's fully complete, that is the amalgamation of contractors and painters and construction workers. And behind all of that is an architectural blueprint. And what a screenplay is an architectural blueprint for a film that's ultimately going to be made with cameras and lights and cast and directors and cinematographers and all these things. So the formatting is really, really, really valuable. How do you learn the formatting? Well, you need a software, but you also have to understand what the formatting is. One of the things, and I'm going to say this in different sections of my talk, but the most important way to learn formatting is to read. You know, the internet is an enormously valuable tool. There are scripts. You can find them online. You can buy them in bookstores. You can find them on Amazon. There are screenwriting groups, Facebook groups, and the most valuable way, in my opinion, to really understand formatting is to read a lot of scripts that are properly formatted. Reading scripts gives you a sense. You learn quickly what works as a script and what doesn't work as a script. By having that insight, by being familiar with, one of the ways that I learned to write, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. I would say the greatest experience that I've had in screenwriting has been through reading. So I worked as a freelance story analyst for Summit Entertainment, for Relativity Media, and what I did was I read hundreds and hundreds of scripts, and I said, is this good? Is it really good? Is it excellent? Or is it bad? And what I found is the more I read, the more I dialed into, okay, is this formatted correctly? Because that tells me something. When something's formatted correctly, it tells me that this writer knows what they're doing. So I trust that I can continue to read through a script. Now, how do you format? It's tricky, but the way that I learned how to format was I read books on formatting. Sid Field is a fantastic writer. There are tons of books. Save the Cat is a book on screenwriting that people absolutely love. But reading books about reading screenplays and also reading books on screenwriting is a really, really good way to get started. The last thing that I have on here is to get the software and to play around with the software and study the software. So walk through, get Final Draft, get the Final Draft app. It's expensive, but the thing about the price of it is, if you're willing to write a screenplay, you're investing in yourself. You are investing in your ability to to write a screenplay. And what you're doing in getting this software is you are committing to yourself that you're going to see your screenplay to fruition. And Final Draft has tutorials that walk you through how the formatting works that are extremely effective. And so I recommend that the software is a really, really good place to start. You can use Word, but the problem with Microsoft Word is ultimately that I look at a script, and if I'm an executive and I have to read 100 scripts and I see that this isn't formatted properly because it's been done in Word, what that sends to me is a message that this person doesn't know how to do this. So in a world where you have to read 100 scripts sometimes a week, it creates a bias. And what you want to do is you want to eliminate bias. So formatting is very important. The next thing I want to get into, next card is really standing out on page 1. So what I encourage people to do, and this is about formatting, but it's about making sure that when you start page 1, that you already know what your story is. And the thing about screenwriting for me is that it's the most fun thing is writing dialogues. The most fun thing is getting into the marrow of scenes and finding things that make you laugh, finding things that make you cry, finding things that feel compelling and tense and so forth. But the reality is, if you haven't really thought out the structure of your screenplay, those scenes are ultimately don't have value. Good story writing is about foundation. I mentioned a book called Save the Cat, and Save the Cat sort of walks you through how to build an outline, how to take an idea, convert it into note cards, convert those note cards into an outline, and then ultimately write your screenplay. It's very, very obvious on page 1 when someone has done this and when someone hasn't, and by page 10, you know for absolute certain. So the way that I encourage people to think about their screenplays is to really think about figuring out what those 3 acts are. What world does the screenplay start in? What happens to your main character that changes his life, that creates a problem that he has to solve? What are the setbacks that he experiences in trying to solve it, and how ultimately does he solve it? And the best way to get to that is through not writing a script, but through outlining. The way that I typically do it is I put up a bulletin board and I have cards and I make them just little bits of information about what happens in each scene, and then it allows me to visualize my screenplay. Once I've been able to visualize it and I can see what it looks like on note cards, what all 3 acts look like, then I begin to write my outline. And what an outline winds up being is somewhere between 10 and say 15 pages, if maybe a little bit longer. But what an outline also does, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about in a little bit, but when you ask me to read, feedback is so important. And when you ask somebody to read a 120-page script that you've written, what you're asking them to do is to give you 2 hours of their life, and then you're asking them to interpret the 2-hour experience that they had and tell you whether it was good or bad and sit down. So you're asking for 4 hours of engagement. For me, if someone says, hey, would you be willing to read a 10-page outline, a thought-out 10-page outline, I can tell very quick, it takes me 10 minutes or 15 minutes to read an outline. I can give you really, really, really good feedback that you can then go re-outline your story infinitely faster, and I can address fundamental problems infinitely quicker than I can if you've written a 120-page screenplay. The thing about a 120-page screenplay, too, is that when you write scenes, to go back to something I mentioned earlier, you wind up becoming very attached to your dialogue. It's just something that happens. I've seen it happen a million times. You become very attached to your dialogue, and you become very attached to your scenes, at which point it's hard to see the forest through the trees. So when I say, hey, this one scene doesn't work, but if that's your favorite scene because you like a line in it, you're going to have a very hard time throwing that scene out because you're married to it, and that scene might be part of the problem with your overall screenplay. You don't run into those problems when you effectively outline. Again, you're creating a blueprint, and the outline is the first step of the blueprint. Also, ways to stand out quickly is just, this is a little bit back to formatting, but is if you look at the page, the page of a screenplay. People really love to overwrite. when I see giant chunks of action and giant chunks of dialogue, what that tells me is that this person has not really thought out their script as a blueprint. What you are giving is you are giving directors cues that they need to then visually create, and actors, you're giving them words and things to say. So most conversations aren't really long. You know, people don't talk for, like, I'm talking forever because I'm giving a class, but for the most part, you know, people say 1, 2, 3 sentences back and forth, and that's when dialogues become vibrant. So you want to make sure that there's a lot of white space on your page. You want you want to make sure that actions lines are no more than 2 or 3 sentences with spaces between them. You think of them more as beats than prose. If it feels like you're writing a book, it's a problem. You want a lot of white space on a page. Let's see. So the next thing, this is a tip that I've heard several times, and I want to relay it. One of the cool things, this is a fun little exercise. It's really interesting to read a script and then watch the film and see how the director took the blueprint that is the screenplay and how it executed on screen. So that people do that. Typically, people watch the movie, and then if they're resourceful, they can find the screenplay somewhere online, and then they go back and read the screenplay. What I think is cool that will give you a sense of how good screenplays are written and how they translate to screen is to find a movie that you like. And read the script, and then to watch the film, and then go back and read the script. Then you'll see how that screenwriter laid out the blueprint for the director to execute it. Another exercise, if you really wanted to get into how to format your screenplay, would be, and this is just a suggestion, would be to watch a screenplay and often you hear about writers, they'll transcribe other writers that they're trying to emulate. But if you were to watch a screenplay and translate the dialogue to literally like dictation, write the dialogue and go in and try and write your own version of this script. Fill in the action and see how you would do it. And then look at your script next to the produced script, and you'll really see where you're overwriting, how you're overwriting. And again, this isn't creating your own script, but what it does is it gives you insight into how formatting works and where your own sort of weaknesses is, what your own weaknesses are, because you'll see quickly how effective professionally written screenplays are. So if you can get your hands on scripts, again, you have to be resourceful online, but you can find them. Reading a script while it's on the screen is a great tip. The next thing, and this is really, really important too, is the power of feedback. And if you've ever been a part of any of the lectures or classes or anything that I've ever done, you know that I believe that feedback is the most important thing that there is in screenwriting, particularly hard feedback. So how does this work? Well, you finish a screenplay, and then the first thing we wanted, what we really want is we want to make our screenplay, because we finished it, we're proud of it. It's 98 to 120 pages. We're very, very proud of it because we finished it. It's our baby. And then we want to get it made. But what we really want is someone to read it. And what we want to hear is, hey, you did a good job. We need people to validate our work. That's important. And we want people that know good films to validate our work. But the reality is, one of the problems that I see when I look at short films sometimes that people have made is that they go too fast. They finish and then they think they're done. The reality is, at draft one, you have just begun the screenwriting. You discover your screenplay in rewriting and through critique. And so what I would challenge you to do is to find readers that are going to tell you what doesn't work about your project. What you want is, you want someone to say, I like 40% of this, but 60% I had a problem with. Because then what you can do is really examine what isn't working, because you know your story inside and out. It's your story. It's something you're personal to, so you don't know what's clear and what isn't. You have a bias towards what you're doing. What bringing in someone to read and challenge your work does is it points out the weaknesses, and that's what we need to strengthen. That's what makes our screenplay different. That's what makes it stand out. So what you want to do is you want to find people that can challenge your work. And what you want is, you want people to be constructive in their criticism. So constructive criticism is, it's a little bit, almost a cliche, but the reality is it's the most important thing that we can do. So what you want is you want people that can provide you, not with answers to the problems that exist in your screenplay, but to provide you with clear explanations as to why things don't work and possible solutions. So that you, as the writer, can work through the problems. And that's really who you want. And so the greatest thing that you can do as a writer to build community is to also learn to be good at giving feedback to other writers, because you then apply that skill set to your own writing process. So what does good feedback look like? And why is it important? One, by reading your peers' work, what you do is you can look at it and you immediately see what is wrong with their work, but what you will also see is what is wrong in your own work. Going back to the large chunks of action, you'll find yourself getting bored. When you read large chunks of action, it inevitably happens. But you learn to tell your peer what the problems are, like how their character development works, how it doesn't work, what doesn't make sense, what isn't tracking, what feels contrived, what feels like it's pushing plot. It's very obvious to reader, and if you can explain that, and you can help people get to that place and walk through the problems with their scripts, what you're going to find is ultimately that not only will their scripts get better, you will become better in your own work. Because you'll write that big chunk of dialogue and you'll go, oh, that seems a little long, or oh, that voice seems a little flat, and you'll push yourself harder so that your first draft is better. The next part, so constructive criticism, learning to give constructive feedback. Think about what you want to hear back, what makes your scripts better, and replicate that to your peers. The next thing is about feedback, and this is something that happens to me a lot. It happens with articles that I write, with pictures that I take, with documentary films that I make. I give people my work, and then I don't get feedback. They don't respond to me. And because I'm an artist first, and I'm vulnerable, and I put my heart and soul into these projects, what winds up happening is I immediately assume, you guys know this, they hated it, right? Nobody wants to be told that their work is terrible, and so what becomes challenging is getting people to read. You know, I have a 2-year-old daughter. I have a full-time business that I'm trying to stand up, and I work in lots of different ways. So when like right now, I have a screenplay on my desk that 2 Oklahomans have given me to look at, to evaluate, and I desperately want to get to it. And I know that every day that I don't respond, those guys are going, oh, I haven't heard from him. He probably hates it. He probably doesn't like it. Why am I not hearing back from this guy? Why am I not getting feedback? And the longer that gap goes, you just assume that it was a pass. The reality is likely the 2 hours that you're asking someone to commit to your screenplay, that person has not been able to carve out. So if your screenplay is important to you and the feedback is valuable to you, the most important thing that you can do is be confidently but politely persistent on getting your feedback. I'm bad at this. This is something that I struggle with, and there are people that I actively avoid because I think they hated something that I made because they never gave me feedback. I know full well it's because they didn't see it, and I've learned to kind of vet my way around those things. But the reality is, if you want someone to read your screenplay and give you 2 hours of time, you got to remind them. It's not their responsibility to say, hey, still trying to get to your script, you've asked the favor, so remind them that they did it. They offered to do it, so they are telling you that they're invested in you, but you do have to casually remind them to read your screenplay. Once they have read your screenplay, another important thing to do is it's hard to expect somebody to read your screenplay and to give you proper feedback. Their feedback may not be very good, so your responsibility as a writer is to be familiar with your own weak spots. So because a lot of times your readers, especially in people in sort of new kind of people new to screenwriting or that haven't done it professionally, is that they don't exactly know what the problems are. But if you're familiar with your work, like let's say I send a script to Tava, I say, how'd you feel about it? And she says, it's great. I liked it. If I actively know that my third act, my transition to my third act is weak and my dialogue is soft, what I want her to do is to tell me that. She might not be comfortable saying, Matt, your dialogue is not as strong as it needs to be, or your third act is weak. In fact, she might have not even clocked it. But if you know the problems with your script and you have, and I have Tava read, I say, did the end make sense? And she'll say, yeah, it kind of made sense. And I'll say, did you think X was believable when he did this? What she will then, it might loosen something up and go, you know what, now that you say that, it was a little strange, and I do think it can be better. So you can drive the person who's reading your script, if you're confident enough in what you have, but are also aware of your weaknesses, you can extract suggestions with people. That you're a master of everything that is yours, and that there's a lot of power in that. So that way, if your mom reads it, or your grandmother, or your brother, or someone that doesn't know how to read a script, what that allows you to, if you are fundamentally familiar enough with your own weaknesses, you can get the feedback that you need by your own ability to challenge what they read. So that's really, really, really important. And going back to getting people to read, just ask until you get your feedback. You have to be 100% persistent, because inevitably they will read it, but you do have to push. So do that. The last thing I'm going to get into is how to get your movie made. I'm going to go over this quickly, and then we're going to open it up to the floor. And I'll have Tava join me for some questions. But you finish your screenplay, and you want your movie to be made. You want somebody to give you millions of dollars to make your film. It's a multi-million-dollar investment, more times than not. Think about the things that you would be willing to give $1 million to make. So that's how good it needs to be. So one, being aware that films ultimately are products that are going to get put into a marketplace, and there is a return expected on those films. It's really important to keep that in mind, and that's why it's important to make sure that your scripts are really good, because again, this is step one of what is always ultimately going to be about, for the most part, about money, because someone's going to have to pay to make your movie unless you're going to pay yourself. So what do we do? How do we work around that? We write because we love it. We write because we have stories to tell, and let the satisfaction be in phases. Phase one, the thing that I care the most about is getting this story told. Check, get that done first. So you've got it on the page. Phase two, now I'm gonna get it really good based on the feedback that I get. Get the feedback, interpret it, apply what works for you and what doesn't, and what's true to your vision. Check. Now your script, now you've written a brilliant script. Now you enter phase three. Now I'm going to try and get my script made. But phases one and phases two have been fulfilling in and of themselves, and you did it because you love storytelling. Then you put it out into the world. By packaging it that way, it becomes a more palatable and enjoyable experience. Again, you write because you love writing. If the expectation was that you're going to make millions of dollars right out the gate, you're never going to get there. That's you hear about these kind of weekend spec scripts that turn into films, but more times than not, you're going to have to write a lot. So what I go back to next is volume. So I can't tell you the number of people that have written. They come to me and they say, I've been writing the screenplay for 5 years, and I think it's finally ready. And I read it, and it reads like the first draft that I warn you guys about. The dialogue's massive, the action is bulky and prosy, overly prosy, the structure doesn't make sense, the formatting's wrong, and they've spent 5 years doing it because they thought they had to get it right. And the reality is, spending 5 years on your very first screenplay is like a painter spending 5 years on his very first painting. The reality is that craftsmanship comes in execution. So you want to do it again and again and again and again. That's really important. I talked about persistence and follow-up. That is really important. One more thing that I would add is humility. I think humility goes a long way. One thing that frustrates me, like this morning on LinkedIn, somebody sent me a script and they said, I've got the next face-off. Okay? So that means that I'm going to read this script and I'm going to expect it to be as good as an iconic movie. So you've got a long way to fall, right? What people like doing for the most part, if you're a producer, if you're in development, what you like doing is you like You like helping people succeed. You like shepherding projects. And I like shepherding projects of people that are confident, but that are humble, that want to learn, that are hungry for feedback. They want their story told, but they want their story correct. So they're hungry for feedback. They're hungry to be better, and they're hungry to do it for the long term. If you're going to build a career out of screenwriting, you're going to write dozens of scripts. I've written dozens of scripts. Very few have been made. So it's about being humble. Humble but confident. I can't emphasize that enough. One more thing that I'll add is, because of iPhones and the quarantine has sort of softened the edges on production value, but making short films, writing short films and making short films is really important, because you don't really know what your film is going to sound like until you've heard actors read the lines, and you've watched it on screen. So you have you can write 50 short screenplays, and you can actually make these with relatively small amount of equipment and a small group of friends. And what happens in writing them is you become focused on execution, and you see how your script goes from an idea to a finished product. And the more you understand that process, the better you're going to be. So while you want to write the big screenplay, the big, massive epic, the Game of Thronesian kind of 8-part series, you should do that, and let that be on your board. Like, let that be a thing that you want to do, but start small. Make things in volume, and start with stories that you're familiar with. Start with stories where you don't have to make up a beginning, a middle, and an end, and an inciting incident. You don't have to grasp characters from wherever. You have characters. Start there and work your way up to the big movie, because then when you get there, you're ready to execute it. You know what it is, and when you walk into HBO to sell your 8-part miniseries, your epic film, it's ready. It's good. So that's what I encourage you to do, and enjoy it. Nobody plays golf. Most people don't go to the golf course and expect to be Tiger Woods in their lifetime. And screenwriting is no different. People play golf because they enjoy it. They paint because they enjoy it. Be a writer because you love to write and you love to tell stories first. So that's kind of the most important thing. So that's kind of my talk. I'm going to open it up to some questions. I'm going to invite Tava to come join me and weigh in maybe on some of what I've said. Wish that I had more time, but I wanted to give an overview, a basic 101. So that's where we're going to go next. So yeah, if you're on Facebook Live or however you're experiencing this talk, feel free, weigh in with some questions, and we'll go from there.
Awesome. That was amazing.
Thanks,
I learned so much.
Oh, good.
I'm not a screenwriter. My background was in producing, but it's so fascinating. I mean, clearly the screenplay is the most important piece. I mean, you can't make a movie without it.
Right.
And that's what I love so much about the greater film industry, is that there are so many jobs, 180 different jobs.
Yep.
So there's something for everybody, no matter what role. So I learned a lot. Thank you.
Sure.
Before I forget, I just want to announce to anybody listening, I know this will be archived, and so hopefully any pass holders can tune in. You talked about script reads.
Yeah.
And so Ricky Masler is an Oklahoma-based producer and casting director, so she cast an incredible script read by all SAG actors who volunteered their time, and they will be live at deadcenterfilm.org on their deadcenter's Facebook or our Facebook Live, and that is, or maybe it's not on, it's online. You have to have a pass. So just to clarify, and that is Saturday, June 13th at 7 p.m. Central Time. So I think anybody listening really would benefit from that.
Yeah.
And you talked so much about feedback.
Yes.
And so we have a couple of questions about that. But before this panel, the chatter, whether it's with studio executives in LA or just among the film community, is what are screenwriters doing during quarantine? I hope they're writing a lot of really great content, because there is going to be, you were talking about softening the edges of the value of production and the film industry. And I have heard and believe and have talked to a lot of studio executives, the demand for content has never been so high. You think about the whole industry shutting down for 14 weeks. So just to kind of put all of this into perspective too, to give all of you hungry screenwriters and actively working screenwriters even more hope, is that I was just going to give one statistic, and then I want to know what you've been doing during quarantine is kind of what I'm getting to. But in 2017, the total combined spend for original content was $14 billion. So that was like the top 4 streaming companies, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, and Apple. So then only 2 years later, that spend increased to $36 billion. So from 14 to $36 billion in 2 years. That also included the Disney Plus and a couple of other streaming companies. But people have money. These streaming companies, all the other studios, they have money and they're looking for your story. Yep. So tell us what you have been up to during this quarantine. Have you been able to write with all the distractions in the world?
Yeah, I've written some. I'm kind of pulled in a lot of different directions right now. So writing hasn't been my central focus, but learning about the industry really has. There's some really exciting things that are happening here in Oklahoma City that you're going to hear about over the course of deadCenter. So what I have been doing, a lot of what I've been doing is learning about how content is changing. To back it up a little bit, one of the things, when I was in Los Angeles for 15 years, and I worked at CBS, so it was cop shows, law shows, medical shows, and that was basically it. And HBO had done Sopranos, and FX was sort of beginning to get into things, and House of Cards had just come out, and Orange is the New Black on Netflix, but streaming wasn't really a thing, and cable TV hadn't really gotten into really substantive material, and that was where I always wanted to go, right? So I always wanted to write the heavier show, like I wanted to write the rich characters that I'm talking about, the personal stories. Like
on 24, you worked on that as well. My all-time favorite.
That broke the mold. That was a show that broke the mold, and that was actually where I started as a production assistant, and I took that kind of with me, which is, what is the next phase of this going to be? And I remember being in a long way to answer your question, but being in Los Angeles, and I written a screenplay about it was sort of a real-time, like kind of 24 style show about what happens the day when a tornado hits a town, and it was sort of followed first responders, storm chasers, weather people, politicians, how they sort of navigate the urgency of a disaster while trying to figure out, is their family okay? And I remember taking it to a bunch of different meetings. I had a lot of traction on it, but they were like, what would this be? Like, this would only be 8 episodes. What does season 2 look like? And I'm like, I don't know.
Right.
Now you can do that. Now, like that, you can write whatever you want. Quibi is a space where you can make shorts. You can tell powerful, impacting personal stories, and there's a space for them now in this world, in the streaming space. And when you talk about a $36 billion content spend, that is independent, but that's also independent of television and film.
Yes,
so
that's right. That's
an
streaming
added
alone.
Content spend that these streaming services are spending. Which should give everybody hope.
That's right.
It's a more hopeful time for screenwriters. It's a more hopeful time for storytellers than it was 10 years ago. And as we look at the world as conflicted as it is, there is a demand for substance in a way, and volume substance. So I've been trying to understand that and go from there.
And that is so important to understand where the entertainment business as a whole is going. Where is that headed? And it really should motivate all of us to write. I mean, sure. Everyone can tell a story. So all right, let's get to a couple of these questions here that are flying in. Dane is asking, are there groups to submit, because you talked a lot about feedback, are there groups to submit stories to? I'm new at this, and I just wrote my first story. Of course, my friends don't want to hurt my feelings, so I'm not getting, he just doesn't feel like he's maybe getting anywhere. So where would you point him?
Oh gosh. I want you to go back to the the advice that I gave earlier. There are screenwriting groups. There are Facebook Oklahoma Screenwriters. There's some small groups like that. What I would advise, certainly there are Facebook groups, deadCenter Film Festival, coming to this, being part of this, engaging with people on these posts. If you are also watching this, tell Dane that you'll read a script, inquire, and see if you can give good feedback.
Network.
Use this as an opportunity to network. That's the first thing I would say. And the second thing I would go back to what I said earlier, which is get the information, know your own weaknesses. So when people tell you that they like it, you ask them, you show them what the weaknesses are, and let them help you kind of talk through it. But in terms of groups, I would use deadCenter as the very first place. Build relationships with people through Facebook, through the different virtual events,
and also at the Oklahoma Film and Music Office,
and
we can help you too.
Reach out to the Oklahoma. Yeah, these guys are the best.
So and we'll be presenting our second annual Film and Music Conference.
Yep.
We've already been talking to Series Fest, which they're an independent pilot festival that is happening actually next week during deadCenter's second week, and we are sponsoring their pitch-a-thon. So we're definitely looking into some things to bring in people like Series Fest for some educational programs. So we'll have to loop you in and get all of you hungry
and
screenwriters out there.
I work in my Facebook page is Matt Payne, travel writer and photography, so it's a mouthful. Yeah. And then I'm going to post a card with my info at the end of this talk. But reach out to me. I may not be able to read your script specifically, but I will engage and answer questions that you have personally. So use me as a resource as much as you can. But be persistent. As I said, you've got to follow up.
Politely persistent. Sure I love that. I love that.
What else?
So a couple more. Hopefully we've got a couple more minutes. So Ethan says you talked about the importance of reading scripts to understand what works. Is there also the importance in reading bad scripts so that you can be more aware of what does not work?
Bad scripts are the best. Bad scripts are so good to read. I love bad scripts, and I love trying to figure out how to make bad scripts. So that's again why I think the importance of networking here, and the new screenwriters, you guys can learn so much because your scripts probably are, if these are the really good ones and these are really bad ones, we're probably somewhere in the middle as we're learning this craft. Right. So there will be enough mistakes that you can learn from. You've got to see mistakes to understand them.
Awesome. Kyle asks, he says, is it important to include quite a bit of character description, what they're wearing and what it looks like?
No. So you just want enough. So again, remember I said about 3 sentences is all you want. Don't tell me the hair is blonde unless it's relevant to the story. So if it's not key and paramount to the blueprint of the story, understanding the director is going to come in and fulfill the actual vision of it, enough that we understand it. So
I love that.
If someone's walking with a cane because they're going to beat somebody with the cane, or the cane's going to become a weapon, include the cane. Otherwise,
I love that. I love you talked about white space. I think that's so incredible. And there's a new book out there that could change everybody's life called White Space. Go check that out. One that I'm looking forward to reading. So I think we're about to wrap it up. I wanted to ask you if there were any screenwriters that have inspired you or that you would recommend our audience trying to find their scripts to either read or to watch their movies. Is there just one person?
I don't have a favorite necessarily.
Okay.
I wish I had a better answer for that.
But your favorite book, one of your favorite books was Save the Cat.
I like
you would
Save
recommend?
the Cat. I think it's easy. It's a simple read that shouldn't be overly complicated.
Right.
That's why I like that book the best.
Okay. Awesome. I think we hit most of our questions. So let me just double check. So, and then surround yourself with people who are just as passionate about your filmmaking interest as you. I love that. That was a great note to end on from Bridget. And any final words to our audience today?
Just keep writing and focus on your passion for storytelling, and do it a lot and do it voluminously. The finish and move on to the next. There's nothing more powerful than a completed project, because that's where you're going to learn and grow. So just finish it, even if you don't like it. Just get to the end. And get people reading and make yourself available to others. Very much golden rule.
I love that.
So thank you guys.
It's great advice. Yeah, thank you so much. That was great wisdom, great instruction. And if you want to hear more from Matt or connect with him, you can connect with him through our office or deadCenter. He also gave you his contact information. So we will see you at the next panel that is up on how to produce and the process of production with Nathan Gardocki up next.
Thank you, guys.